Now I feel better. Of course, that might not do any good. You see, nobody's missing a porpoise. It's a dolphin that's been taken. The common harbor porpoise has an abrupt snout, pointed teeth, and a triangular thoracic fin, while the bottlenose dolphin, or Chersia truncatus, has an elongated beak, round cone-shaped teeth, and a serrated dorsal appendage. But I'm sure you already knew that. That's what turns me on about you. Your attention to detail.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast, where we discuss the world of film from a fresh angle. And now your host, Robert Yaniz Jr.
Hello, welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast. This is Kai. And on today's episode, I'm actually going to be interviewing the host of the podcast on normal days, Robert Yaniz Jr. And in this podcast today, it's the first launch of the Crooked Table Podcast that goes in and talks to guests about what movie had an impact on them and the reasons why. And no better person to introduce that podcast than Robert Yaniz Jr. himself. Hi, Rob.
Hello. This is weird. This was your idea or my idea? I forget how we came up with the idea of flipping it and you being like, I could interview you, because it only makes sense for me to sort of be the quasi first guest on my show, and I guess sort of inspired by Alpha Waves Radio and their imminent return to the podcast realm as well.
Yeah, sort of. I think it was one of those things where one of those married people's conversations where you know each other so well that you finish each other's sentences, you finish each other's thoughts.
I was about to do it. You were in the joke. I was about to jump in and say sentences. Or you could have done the Frozen version and been like, sandwiches.
Sandwiches!
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, no, because you said it. No, because you said it, and then I said, I was actually thinking the same thing.
Well, that's how we came up with the name of our daughter and everything. So that tends to be the Marshall and Lily thing from How I Met Your Mother. But we love a cornmeal body scrub. We kind of become one person after a while, which is a little weird. But nice at the same time.
Now that Rob and myself have given you the spiel about being a cornmeal body scrub, today's feature presentation on this new podcast launch is going to be about Ace Ventura. And I'm pretty sure that no one thought I was going to say that. I know that I was surprised when Robert brought that up. So,
Ace Ventura, the animated series, or the When Nature Calls, or the, the straight-to-video Ace Ventura Jr.?
Ace Ventura, Pet Detective.
Yeah, that's what was
starring Jim Carrey.
It's funny, because right before we started recording, Kai's like, one of my pet peeves is when you leave the water on, when you're rinsing something and putting it in the dishwasher. And one of my pet peeves, as she knows, is speaking regarding film titles, right? Remember we talked about this not long ago, and I was like, that's an episode or a feature.
But I thought your really big thing about that was when there's a couple when you say the, but there's no the in the title.
Or when people are like,
or when you do a Jurassic Park,
the Star Wars, or Matrix instead of the Matrix, or or when people are like Captain America 2. I'm like, that's not what it's called, but okay.
But sometimes you have to do that in casual conversation.
Yes.
Just to make it easier on people. I say Thor 2 because I'm just like, I'm not going to say in casual conversation Thor, A Dark World. Like, I can't. I don't have that kind of time.
Thor, The Dark World? Yeah, you do.
It took an extra 2 seconds of my life than just saying Thor 2.
I think I think you think your time is more precious than it really is.
Wow. Okay. So, and then you also have a pet peeve when you have movies that are named Jurassic Park, A Lost World, and then what was it, Jurassic Park 3?
No, first of all, there's a couple of things wrong with this. One, I don't like when they spontaneously introduce numbers into a series, and that's what you're mentioning. But the second thing is, they don't even call it Jurassic Park, The Lost World. It's actually called The Lost World, Jurassic Park. So the Jurassic Park...
Oh, wow, that's super messed up.
If you put that alphabetically... Lost World is not anywhere even near Jurassic Park, or Jurassic Park 3, or Jurassic World, or Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. It's in the L section, like a couple letters down. So there's no consistency whatsoever there, which is sort of like, I think the Fast and the Furious is the modern example of kind of ridiculous naming. But now we're getting way off topic. This is a whole totally different subject. So we're going to be talking about Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. 1994 comedy starring Jim Carrey. So let's listen to a little bit of the trailer right now.
Jim Carrey is Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. He's the best there is.
Excuse me, gentlemen. Pet Detective.
Actually, he's the only one there is.
You really love animals, don't you?
If it gets cold enough.
Now, the mascot of the Miami Dolphins has been kidnapped.
Oh, righty then.
And he's on the case of a lifetime.
Listen, Pet Dick, how would you like me to make your life a living hell?
Well, I'm not really ready for a relationship, Lois.
In case you all listening are not familiar with Ace Ventura, a pet detective, it's a story written by Jim Carrey back. It came out in 1994, I believe, and it was him being as zany as ever, and it was really like everybody's first introduction to Jim Carrey's talents and everything that he could do. And Courtney Cox is also in this film, and it's set in Miami, Florida, because during the time of when the Miami Dolphins went to the Super Bowl, which it's very possible that was the last time, is in 1994. I don't know. I don't follow football. But he's pet detective, and he's looking for a lost dolphin of the Miami Dolphins team, their mascot, and kind of just follows his adventures of being a pet detective and his zaniness.
Yeah. So
anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say no. Well, Jim Carrey wrote the screenplay with Jack Bernstein and the director Tom Shadyac, who he actually worked with later on Liar Liar and Bruce Almighty, which are again probably two of my other favorite Jim Carrey comedies. And this was really, as you mentioned, sort of Jim Carrey's breakthrough. This is what took him from In Living Color to movie stardom, kind of the first of his three big movies in '94, followed by The Mask and Dumb and Dumber. So yeah, it's just, I'm pretty sure a lot of people are aware of this one still, even though I wonder if this is one of those movies that like millennials have kind of forgot or haven't really just like, not millennials, but like the younger what is that, Generation Z?
Z?
We're running out of.
Yeah, for now it's Generation Z. The name could change.
You know what the interesting thing is? The way this world is headed, it makes sense that the next generation might be Generation AA.
Wow. That's pretty good.
Thank you.
That's
I just
pretty
came up
good.
with that at the top of my head. The listeners can have that one for free. So yeah, I wonder if this is a movie that Generation Z has. I'm sure they've probably at least heard of it, but I wonder if they've seen it because it was pretty. It was pretty impactful for our generation, who are kind of tweens and early teenagers at this point.
I already knew who Jim Carrey was because I was a big fan of In Living Color, and I actually could do the Fire Marshal Bill voice, and it totally creeped out my sister.
But you can't do it anymore because I
can't do it. I also could do. I used to be able to do the voice of Gonzo as well, but I can't do that either. And it used to creep my sister out because I could even do the jaw movement.
You know who you are. You're the character that Kel Mitchell plays in Mystery Men, where he's like, I can go invisible, but only when no one's watching. Do you ever see that?
Yeah.
Did you ever see that?
No, I didn't.
Oh, that's a weird movie. It's fun.
So when this came out, I think I saw it in the movie theater, and I don't know how many other 11-year-olds did this, but I went around saying, alrighty then, all the time. And so I would ask my mom a question, and before I'd even give her a chance to answer, I'd say, alrighty then. And she's like, Kai, you really need to stop saying that. And, but I really liked that movie a lot when I was younger, and I still really like it a lot. Me and you have watched it together since we've been together, and it hasn't lost its charm to me. It kind of just brings back those memories of when I was a kid, and I enjoyed it.
So when did you then we'll get into my side of it, I guess, and why I picked this one to talk about. When did you first just discover it? Like, did you see it in theaters, or was it a home video kind of deal, or on cable, or like what point?
I think I saw it. In movie theaters with friends of mine, okay. Perhaps. I really kind of didn't see movies with my parents after a certain age because, my mom was working a lot, and but yeah, I would go see a lot of these movies with my friends. And in fact, when I think about it, maybe my mom only saw it once. Maybe she only saw it on when it was airing on television. But yeah, so I saw it with friends, and then saw it a lot on TV. I think Fox aired it a lot.
This is one of those that was like on TBS and things like that a lot. I don't know if Warner Brothers just really, was selling the licensing rights to any cable station that would have it. But I feel like this was one of those that was constantly on like either Comedy Central or something like that.
Yeah, definitely true.
So for me, this was one I remember very distinctly because I was a fan of Jim Carrey's From In Living Color, which I sort of casually watched, every once in a while, even though I was 11 at the time this movie came out. And I mean, we're pretty much the same age. We're 5 days apart. So I was 11 when this film came out, and probably a little too young to be watching some of that stuff. But I wanted to see it in theaters, and I remember, looking forward to it and then missing it for some reason. I don't remember why I missed it in theaters. Maybe something was going on. We didn't have time, or it got kind of lost in the shuffle. But I remember that my Nana actually bought it for me on VHS when I hadn't even watched it yet, because that's how excited I was to see it. And if the older listeners will remember, this was back in the day where when movies came out on home video, or now it's DVD and Blu-ray and streaming and things like that. But when movies came out on VHS, they didn't all come out, ready, priced to own. There were pretty much like the big blockbusters, or the Disney movies, and like the Independence Day, Jurassic Park, those kinds of event movies that families would buy and watch over and over and over again. The '89 Batman. I remember this was one of those that was priced to own for some reason, which is weird because it's just a random PG-13 comedy, and it was a hit, but it wasn't like Mrs. Doubtfire or something like that, which was one of the highest grossing movies that year.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember getting that, and I remember watching that in my at my house, and really loving it. And that combined with The Mask, which I wonder if this came on VHS around the same time that The Mask either came out or was about to come out, because that came out in June, and I think this one came out like January, February, also both of '94. So I was Ace Ventura and The Mask combined really put me on like a Jim Carrey obsession mode, and I had a big eraser, like a big eraser that was shaped like a pencil, that I wrote all his little catchphrases from both those movies on it. Alrighty then, and smoking, and all that stuff from both movies. So I was even wearing a lot of tank tops and with like crazy design shirts over it, kind of in the Ace Ventura style. That's how influential this movie was on my sort of comedy upbringing, I guess. And I think still to this day, Jim Carrey is one of my favorite comedic actors, and
yeah, I like him too.
And who I quote on a regular basis, either this movie or The Mask or Liar Liar or Bruce Almighty or
We had even quoted Liar Liar today.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, the other thing with Ace Ventura is that was also the same year that Friends premiered with the ingenue Courtney Cox.
Mm-hmm.
And I already knew who she was because I had just gotten myself really involved in Friends, or maybe it had just come out or something. Maybe the season had just premiered, but I already knew who she was, and I remembered her from Cocoon. And so maybe that's the other reason the movie did okay, was because it just
Friends started in '94, but I think in the fall, right? Didn't it start in the fall?
When did Ace Ventura come out?
January or something, like January, February, early in the
Oh,
year.
really?
I'll look it up. Hold on IMDb.
Oh,
but yeah, it was an early release. That's how he was able to have Ace Ventura in the winter, The Mask in the summer, and Dumb and Dumber in the fall, which is insane because he got paid I think a couple $100,000 for this, and a couple million or something for The Mask, and then by Dumb and Dumber he was getting he was banking on it already, on his way to getting the $20 million for Cable Guy 2 years later.
but how did they even know that? How didn't he film them all beforehand?
I think this was already in the can when they started doing The Mask. or something. It's weird. I'd have to look up I have to do more research than I have. I have to be more prepared for than I actually am for this. But yeah, something like that. So okay, see, February 4th, 1994.
Oh,
is when this came out
right
in
around
the US.
right. That's right around the Super Bowl.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay,
that's
then
pretty good
maybe all right.
marketing.
Then I'm full of crap then.
Well, maybe you discovered it. I mean, maybe when you were rewatching it on VHS and things like that is when Friends was already on the air at that point.
Or maybe it's possible I didn't see the movie theater. I mean, this was over 20 years ago now. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we're going on almost 25 years ago this movie came out.
Right.
Can you believe it? That's insane.
I know, it's weird.
No, it
it's
is
a few
really
months
weird.
away.
I know. We should
So-
have another one just to talk about the 25th anniversary.
Oh,
Just kidding.
Well, I keep. You know what? This is actually an interesting idea. I keep sort of threatening to, because what we do in our house is we do choices and we alternate who picks what movies we watch, just so that Kai can keep me in check. So I don't just pick every movie. So all we do is we don't only watch movies that Rob wants to see, pretty much. And I think it would be. I keep threatening to choose Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls, which is a vastly inferior movie to this in pretty much every way. And every little bit of, because Ace in this movie is very wacky and over the top and ridiculous, but also kind of grounded and humanized in a way, because he has moments where you're like, oh, he's like showboating all the time, constantly like in this performative mode, like Jim Carrey is, but underneath he's like a real human person who has real emotions and that cares about stuff. But in the second one, he's just basically a cartoon character. So, but it would be an interesting, because we've done crooked commentaries before, Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls would be an interesting one, because we haven't seen it together, and you probably haven't seen it in a long time because you don't really care for it.
yeah.
And
That's accurate.
it got caught up in my whole thing where I rewatched that a lot too. Like I liked that when I was 12 when it came out, and then as into my adult years, I was like, oh, this kind of sucks. But moving ahead, and again, listeners, this is the first time we've done this format. That's why it feels a little choppy and awkward. We'll, I'm sure, smooth this out as we go along. So I guess
Even though we're still awkward.
well, we're awkward.
That's
in our
not gonna change.
No, we're awkward in our daily lives in general. And it's actually the next episode we're gonna have, where it's gonna be you and me again, but talking about a movie that Kai wants to talk about, and a movie that meant something to Kai or resonated with her in some way.
No, I was actually just going to say, I think it's time to move into the details about Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, with spoilers, with reviews, with what works and what doesn't, so on and so forth. So, Rob, you want to take it away? What's overall your review of this movie?
So I've seen this many times. So it's it's films like this that I grew up watching. I have to kind of view them from two different perspectives. One, the person that has been watching it for 20 plus years, and two, the film critic who's viewing it objectively as both a time capsule for the time it was released, as well as like how well it has aged and that kind of thing. So on the one hand, I still love this movie, and it's probably one of my quote favorite, but not necessarily best comedies that I own and that I've seen many times over the years. Like, this is the kind of movie that I used to watch in like 20-minute segments while I was having my bowl of cereal before I went to school each morning. It was this and Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls and The Mask were the ones the Jim Carrey ones that I watched a lot before I had to catch a bus or my parents took me to school or whatever. So taking that aside, I'm going to try and view it a little more objectively. There's a lot in this movie that is very messy. There's a lot of I think the film does a good job of sort of leaning on Jim Carrey and letting his kind of tour de force performance sort of capture everything. It does come across very manic, and I can see that turning some people off. Like, if I were to see this now for the first time, I wonder if I would just kind of be like, oh, this is like stressing me out. It's just, this guy's all over the place,
Yeah.
Because Jim Carrey, he has that similar kind of rubber-faced shtick that he does in later movies, like in Liar Liar and Bruce Almighty and things like that. But it also gets it's also more smoothed out. In some ways, I could see how people would feel, coming into this, that it does kind of seem like a SNL sketch stretched out to 87 minutes, which I think is which I have burned into my memory as the exact length of this movie for some reason, because that's how I was like obsessed with it, like I said.
Well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
To interrupt you here.
Please.
If this movie came out now and in some of the things that don't work about it were changed that you're going to talk about, do you think that this movie would still be do you think people would still like it? Or do you think it's one of those movies that, those movies that
Capture
they get
lightning in
hyped
a
up?
bottle?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Like from an outside perspective, this guy just kind of feel like a movie where the story is ridiculous and it's really just about this outlandish character kind of living his life and on a whatever quest to solve a mystery or something. So in that way, it's kind of like, well, what separates a movie like this from something like The Master of Disguise, which is a terrible movie, but also kind of a similar ridiculous character kind of dealing with in his wacky world and stuff, or Corky Romano, which was another terrible movie, but is also literally an SNL person. And so was Master of Disguise. That's funny. What separates those from this? And I think part of it is Jim Carrey in this performance. There's a reason this character is so iconic, and it's because Ace Ventura is so showboaty in a way, but then at the same time, there's moments where like he insults Melissa because he's frustrated about the case, and then she walks away, and he feels bad, and he like goes over to apologize. This is right when she gets the call about Roger Podacter is found dead. And you see like a softer side to him at certain points. You know what I mean?
Well, I thought you were also going to say that the reason why too is because this movie was the first of its kind.
That's true.
This
was also before something like Austin Powers, which was again.
And this was also before Night of the Roxbury.
Right. That's true.
So he was really, and he wasn't even an SNL character, but it's in Living Color. It kind of had a similar idea, but yeah, he was the first. Character like this.
Yeah. Although we should mention this is not explicitly based on a character from In Living Color, but it does kind of feel like something that maybe he came up with for that show, and it's like, oh, we can make a movie out of that.
Actually, I think I don't know. I know you didn't watch a lot of In Living Color, but I did, and I know we were watching some older In Living Colors back a couple years ago from the library, and remember that episode, that scene where there was this guy at a party and he was being absolutely ridiculous. The character Jim Carrey was playing there seemed very Ace Ventura like to me.
There might have been some inspiration based on that.
Even when he was playing Captain Kirk, he was kind of very Ace Ventura-y. Yeah,
a little bit. Well, William Shatner is, I think, an impression he did do on In Living Color.
I think maybe Ace Ventura was just kind of like a mismatch of all of his characters on that show.
Right, and with the novelty of a pet detective, kind of gives it a little bit of a hook. Like, whoa, a detective who specifically tracks down pets! What a crazy idea, I should point out, too, I just checked on IMDb that the film is 86 minutes, but the VHS that I had growing up was 87 minutes because it had that extra minute of footage that is, like, promoted on the original VHS, where that's the scene where he does the whole Siegfried and Roy thing.
Oh, yeah. Which I didn't even see that until we watched it together. Like, I was like, what is this?
With the white tigers
even when
and the stuffing in the pants who let him.
And then when they play it on television, then they would have extra scenes.
My God, I know. I want that version. I don't think it's on DVD or anything.
It's so strange. I don't like it when they do that.
Yeah, that's a little weird.
It's like you're watching a totally different movie.
It's like an extended cut of a film that you've watched for years. It's a little strange.
It's so they can fill it up with commercials, basically.
Well, yeah.
If it's not long enough.
Exactly, yeah. That's exactly what it is. Because there's that scene, and he goes looking for Ray Finkel, and at Collier County and wherever, and he ends up at that bar, and he gets in a fight, and he takes off his contact lens and breaks it like it's a bottle of beer or something. It's weird. You think the movie is weird. The deleted scenes are even stranger in a way. I'm like, what the hell? They normalize this a little. But for me, I think part of what makes this age well and better than some of the other ones, that some of the other movies that we saw as kids and didn't mind so much, and then we watched them recently and weren't so great, Little Monsters. is that the movie does establish him as a real person. Like, you know, there's a humanity behind it, and I think that's what helps ground the rest of it, which is why it's easy for me to say this is a better movie than some of those other ones that I mentioned. And it really does kind of all hang on his performance. You know, what about for you? What do you think this movie still works overall? And we'll get to the problematic aspects in a second.
I think if it came out today, or even if you're just a person that's never even seen a movie before, and I don't know, I don't think people would like it as much. Like, it's similar to what was going on when we watched Napoleon Dynamite and you'd never seen it. And I'm like, I think you're really gonna like this movie. Well, no, it's like you said, it was a lightning in a bottle, because I think Ace Ventura has the same thing, that it was iconic when it came out because we hadn't seen anything like that before, and I just don't think that it would hold up now if you don't have the same nostalgia for it, and you know, and you haven't now seen The Night at the Roxbury, Corky Romano. I don't know how many people even saw Corky Romano, honestly.
Not very much. But it didn't do very well. I don't know why that's the one that came into my head. It's just random.
And there's other ones but anyway, yeah, I think that people just be like, okay, I don't get it.
Well, it's also
this is weird.
The industry has changed a lot, obviously, since then. Because like what are you barely see any really big hit comedies nowadays. Like, I'm looking at this year's box office just for comparison's sake, and it's mostly superhero movies or action movies, or like the highest straight up comedy that's not based on like a Marvel comic or something is Crazy Rich Asians, which is a rom-com. And then you go further and it's like Ocean's 8, which is a franchise thing. And like the only real original comedy that's like a PG-13, like a grown-up comedy, not Peter Rabbit or something, that's the highest rated on here is Night School at number 28. And that made $71 million, which is about the same that Jim Carrey's Ace Ventura made 25 years ago. This made $72 million in 1994, which was really good in 1994.
Wow, that is something.
So, it's for some reason comedies don't really connect as well as they used to. Everything is just about spectacle, which in a way is a shame. Everything has to be $150 million budget these days to really get people out to the theater, because everybody has Netflix streaming and, you know, Amazon Prime and the home theaters and things like that. So I agree with you. I mean, I think if this came out now, it would probably be like, here's a perfect example. It would probably be like a movie that comes out in theaters a couple weeks and then disappears, becomes like destined to be a cult classic, like Popstar, the Lonely Island movie, which I loved a couple years ago, which nobody saw.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I think that or maybe it wouldn't have been a cult classic either. I mean, it's also with comedy, like you said, times have changed. You know, we're a lot more politically correct than we used to be. We're a lot more sensitive. We're a lot more just woke.
That's a good transition into what we really need to talk about.
And I think that comedy is hard. Like even stand-up comics are having a hard time not offending their audience.
Right.
And it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder with a comedy than drama, obviously.
Yeah, I agree. Which, to be fair, a lot of that is justified. Like a lot of that is, you know, I think sometimes people are overly sensitive to things, but I think in a lot of cases we're being sensitive to things that we should have been sensitive about a long, long, long time ago, just because the, considerations for people of different races or ethnicities or sexual orientations just wasn't there decades ago, because, you know, that's a whole political conversation that we're not going to get super into. But with Ace Ventura Pet Detective, I almost said When Nature Calls. There's a lot more offensive about that, and it's just because the movie's not good. In Ace Ventura Pet Detective, it really boils down to there's the part of this movie that makes it hard to watch now is the fact that it's very homophobic, it's very transphobic. Like if we're in an age now where LGBTQ plus rights are like really like people are really on top of that. Like if you say the wrong thing on Twitter, or if you like let slip any kind of, not that I would, because I don't have that perspective on things, but if people are very vilified based on what they say as far as to the LGBTQ plus community,
Yeah, definitely.
And this film not only has, and this was obviously if you watch any movie from the 90s, especially, I don't know, the 80s too, but like especially the 90s. Like, I feel like every movie you watch in the 90s, there's jokes being like, ho ho, gay people, aren't they weird? And this movie has that one in the bathroom where he's trying to see the guy's hand to check the ring while he's peeing. And then the guy's like, what the hell? And then smiles at him because he's into it. And then, like, kind of prances after Ace when he leaves the restroom. So you have that kind of thing in this movie. But really, it really all hinges on the big twist at the end with Ray Finkel and Lois Einhorn and the whole Einhorn is a man and that whole reveal. And Jesus, that does not play very well at all now. Watching it now, I'm like, oh my God, this would upset so many people, justifiably so, So what are your thoughts about, like, that element of the film? And because that's the thing, it's not like a throwaway joke here or there. Like I said, we have one of those, one really obvious one, but it's also the whole third act kind of hinges on that. What are your thoughts on that part of it? And obviously you can't. It's partially unfair to judge a movie from 1994 by 2018 standards, but at the same time, part of what makes movies endure is that they're kind of timeless in a way, and this has such a dated viewpoint on a kind of key minority right now that's, especially if you're following the news these days, really fighting for its rights. So what are your thoughts on that? It's a long-winded way of saying what do you think about it?
Well, I'm also curious on what Jim Carrey thinks about it. Looking back now, almost 25 years, to a movie that he basically wrote and starred in that was homophobic and transphobic, and if he's had any verbal regrets about it.
Right.
Because, ultimately he's accountable, and I like to think that he doesn't really feel that way, and people can change. People mature, people get woke, and so I think, being 11 years old, I didn't think anything of it.
Exactly.
But getting older and seeing the world around me, and clearly it's really disrespectful and not very sensitive to that, to a group of people at all. And it's also, he was also joking about the Crying Game in it too, because that movie had just come out
the year before, right?
Yeah. So I wonder if it was him also trying to just do a satire from that movie.
It's a little bit of that, but I mean, yeah, going back, back at this stage, obviously we were kids, so we weren't really even thinking about, oh, that could actually hurt a lot of people, like damage a lot of people, and in a way kind of shape a lot of people's perspectives as far as, oh, it's a transgender person, gross, or whatever, because that's the whole thing in this movie, is that when everybody finds out that Lois Einhorn is Ray Finkel, everybody is just like so disgusted by the whole idea of it, and it's like, I can't imagine being a transgender person watching this now. It would probably I don't even know. Like I said, I can't imagine, but it's.
Well, it wasn't also that he wasn't also kind of just disrespectful that Ray Finkel just wanted to become a woman just so he could escape from. I mean, I guess I don't know if this part was clear. I don't know. Was he wanting to become a woman because he was actually transgender, or did he want to become a woman to hide away from?
That is a good point.
The person that he was.
So you're
to
saying,
get away from his crimes.
They don't really get into that. It's weird, but you do tell that when Lieutenant Einhorn kisses people like Dan Marino, it's just almost like it's weird. It's just a weird passion, because he hates Dan Marino so much that it almost feels like it's kind of in a way a sexual obsession too. But they don't explicitly state it, But that's a good point. Did Ray Finkel just become a woman pretty much just to assume the identity of that missing hiker or whatever, that he found out about in the newspaper, and that Ace finds later in his effects. So I think that's disrespectful too, because it's like basically saying it's like a throwaway thing. It's like, oh, he just
they're just gonna be doing this to do this instead of those feelings that
instead of
that the person decides on when they make that decision, and then all of the trauma and money that goes into something like that too.
Right. And
so it has no sensitivity to any of it.
I just did a review for a documentary film called Transformer, which is about that very thing. And it's a real issue that, people have a identity crisis, and they feel that their body doesn't match who they feel like they are inside. And this movie kind of, in a way, now you're making me think it's even more offensive than I thought it was. It sort of trivializes that. And it's like, yep, no, it's just the way I can hide. I just tuck it back, and there you go, I'm a woman now. I can kind of assume a new identity, not because I feel different necessarily, but because it's convenient for me, basically. It does allude to that a little bit, that maybe Ray Finkle did have a little bit of a transgender leaning or something. But the movie, I mean, at the end of the day, the movie doesn't really care. It's not really concerned with the transgender perspective on it. It's a goofy comedy about this guy who says "alrighty then" and talks out of his ass, pretty much, So,
right.
But in the 90s, that was, I guess, that was acceptable. Most people weren't standing up for that community of people, and they, in a way that's kind of upsetting, because they were even more marginalized than they are now. And it's heartening in a way to see. In a way, it's frustrating and a kind of disappointing to go back and watch movies that you loved as a kid. And I still love this movie quite a bit. But as a person that grew up with it, not a person who's kind of reckoning with the political and social commentary of it, it's heartening to go back and see these movies in a way and see how far we've come from this time where things were okay. You see the F word, not that F word, the F word for gay people, that was routinely dropped in like PG movies, like there was no big deal, like kids movies and everything,
Mm-hmm,
and
yeah.
And that was just cool. It was just like, oh, you're being a wuss, and that was just synonymous with that, basically. So particularly with the LGBTQ plus community, I think we've come so far, our generation, from the movies we grew up with to kind of the things we're seeing happen now in our culture, in our society, and the way that that's reflected in our entertainment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we've all kind of, well, a lot of us have become more woke through the years, and
it's not
the maturity.
Not everybody's ever going to get there.
Yeah, and we've really, I think that the generation coming up after millennials, Generation Z currently, but it could change the name. They're already showing themselves to be a lot more sensitive and accepting generation than even we are. And it's good. It's good. And I think that sometimes, a lot of times you have to have a movement in order to get those groups to not feel marginalized anymore, to feel heard and seen. And there's definitely been a lot of support in, the last decade, maybe even less, for the transgender community, as well as the, gay and lesbian community to be more seen and heard and not feel, marginalized anymore.
Yeah.
So we've come a long way.
I think so. I think this is a good time to move into final thoughts. We kind of touched generally on our general thoughts of the film and stuff. So overall, I mean, the film has aged kind of horrifically as far as what we're talking about. It's hard to recommend to people now who had never seen it, especially younger people who would be offended by some of the third act content. But as someone who grew up with it, I still enjoy watching it kind of separate, as long as I separate that part of it from my mind, and I could just enjoy the film for what it is and recognize that we don't see things that way anymore. I do love Jim Carrey's performance. I love his swagger in the role, all his catchphrases, and a lot of the setups with him and Snowflake, with him going and tracking down Ray Finkle, with Tone Loc, which is, talk about that's like the most 90s thing ever. Tone Loc is in this movie and does this like the theme song at the end, which I have listened to Spotify. I have listened on Spotify in the last year because I like it. The soundtrack's actually on there.
Do you even know any other Tone Loc songs?
A Wild Thing and Fucky Coleman Deep. and then Ace is in the House, which is from this. But Atone Loc is really funny in it, and Jim Carrey obviously is great. Sean Young is really good in it too, and of course Courtney Cox. And I actually kind of do buy into their little love story. Actually, I think it's they have some pretty good chemistry.
Yeah, they were cute. Did you know she used to date Michael Keaton for a long time?
Oh, I think you did tell me that. I forgot that.
I think she was dating Michael Keaton when the movie came out.
When this movie came out.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
He was so. He had just been Batman a couple times right before that.
Yeah. Well, with Sean Young, I actually thought that I didn't see her in anything else at this time, so I actually thought she was a man because of this movie. Okay. I'm like, it doesn't help that her name is Sean.
Right. Well, she also has very handsome features, I guess, as you would say.
And a deep voice, so I kind of thought, I thought she was a man already. It was good casting.
Good casting, yeah, for sure.
They had me fooled.
Do you see how Sean Young looks in this movie? That's exactly why every time I see Lizzie Kaplan, I'm like, look, it's like young Sean Young. Lizzie Kaplan has a little bit like smoky eyes, kind of the kind of deeper, a little bit of a deeper voice kind of going on and stuff. Anyway, that's what I always think about. Plus, yeah, you hadn't seen Blade Runner. You still haven't seen Blade Runner. That's one we're going to watch pretty soon. Overall, do you still enjoy the film, and what any highlights for you other than, I guess, the stuff I mentioned?
I mean, I just think it's a fun movie, and it's really nostalgic for me whenever I watch it, and because it was sort of Jim Carrey coming into his own
at the height of
his first
powers.
and I love Jim Carrey even now, and it's a shame that he hasn't really come out with anything that people see.
Well, he's on. He's got a Showtime show called Kidding. I think it's on Showtime that I might check out at some point because is it? I don't know if it's now. I'm not sure if it's Showtime or HBO, whatever it is. I have to find out because he's been in the news a lot. Like been very vocal on Twitter about things, and he has a documentary on Netflix with him and his process of playing Andy Kaufman. It's on Showtime. Kidding, by the way. In Man on the Moon and things like that. So he's been gradually coming back out there. So it would be really cool to see him kind of making some big movies again. Not necessarily going back and doing an Ace Ventura 3 or something like that at this point. It seems like we're getting a lot of people coming. I mean, we have Jamie Lee Curtis coming back as Laurie Strode now for the first time in 20 years, essentially. So, and he did do Dumb and Dumber too. So I guess nothing, can't ever count him out of something like that. I think he's kind of past this kind of manic thing, and he seems to be doing more of his Eternal Sunshine-ish, like introspective kind of subtle comedy,
Yeah.
But yeah, he's definitely someone that I still respect and admire a lot, and who is, was as impactful on me as a kid as someone like Robin Williams, or Eddie Murphy, people like that.
Yeah, the 90s was a good decade for comedians. It's a movie that I didn't have to get too caught up on to know what you were talking about because I've seen it many, many times.
Same here.
So that works out.
And that's the thing about this podcast is that we might have future guests on, and they might, this episode is me making the choice, but going forward, it's pretty much the guest will be choosing the movie that we discuss. And in some cases, it might be something that I haven't seen at all. So when we get to the point of what is your background with this movie, I'll be like, I never even heard of this until I watched it, and here are my thoughts. But yeah, it's just such a fun one, and it felt like the perfect movie to talk about in light of how it's kind of I have kind of a complicated relationship based on my view on it then and my view on it now, looking at it as a 30-something-year-old man in this climate, politically and everything. But this just, Jim Carrey monologuing about, the double pane soundproof glass. There's no way that neighborhood, but actors fall on the way down with that door shut. Like, I can literally do the whole movie, like, from memory. It's that big of a movie for me. So it was fun to talk about this one. And it's cool that you and I, this is a film that we both kind of had a similar history with and both have watched countless times over the last couple of decades. All right. So any other thoughts? I think we're wrapping it up now.
No. Of course, you can find me on Twitter at the Volkey LLC, as well as you can also find me on YouTube on my own YouTube channel.
Next episode, which again I'm not sure 100% when I'm gonna. I think next episode will be like legit the first of the initial real batch. This is kind of the sort of soft pilot. This is a soft reboot episode of the podcast, I guess. And that will be Kai and I again talking about whatever movie Kai decides she wants to talk about. I think she's still kind of trying to decide which one that might be. You know what might be a good one? Because it is one of your favorite movies, and there was some big news about it recently. Clueless would be a good one for you to pick.
Well, I'm not going to say that I weren't thinking about it when you were talking about Ace Ventura and being able to quote movies.
Well, that might be a good one then for you, because they want to do a remake of it, and I know that has a lot of people very upset, and I think that's really stupid as well. So
I didn't know anything about this.
Oh, I thought I posted it. Or told you about it. Anyway, so that might be something worth talking about next episode whenever we do that.
If you're interested in joining me on the show to chat about one of your favorite films, head on over to crookedtable.com/guest. Or you can consider supporting the show at patreon.com/crookedtable. Of course, you can always find more podcasts, reviews, videos, and other movie-related goodies over at crookedtable.com. Until next time, this has been the Crooked Table Podcast, and I've been Rob.
This has been a production of crookedtable.com. All rights reserved.
The art of a little KED.